It's the battle of the grains today, specifically ancient grains. I'm going to be making 4 different recipes with 3 different, very popular ancient grains, and let's see how they turn out. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on the channel I teach you all about real whole grains, all from a biblical perspective. I teach you how and why to be milling your own grains, using them in your home, and more. All right, so as I mentioned, this is kind of a battle with the ancient grains today. Ancient grains are very popular right now, and I've actually chosen 3 of some of the most popular ones that we're going to be testing today. Now, these are grains from Grand Teton Ancient Grains, who I love. They are my go-to farmer right now for organic ancient grains, and we actually have them to thank for bringing these beloved ancient grains, specifically einkorn, to the United States, but we'll talk more about that later. So the grains that we're going to be using today, we have spelt, we have Khorasan, and we have einkorn. So Khorasan is like one of my most favorite grains to use, which is why it's not in the nice bags, because I buy them in buckets. And so that's why we have it in a jar today, because I already used my bag. But I'm going to be using these, and the recipes that we're going to use are waffles, blueberry muffins, English muffins, and rolls. So if you noticed, I didn't do any sort of yeast bread, and that is because ancient grains typically don't really turn out one of your typical tall sandwich type loaves. The reason for that is just because the gluten development, they do not develop as strong of a gluten as the modern grains are. One of the many reasons why people prefer the ancient grains, but because of this, it's a little bit more tricky and difficult to get more of a sandwich type loaf of bread. So I'm just going to be converting my typical recipes. These are actually all found in my cookbook, linked down below. The muffins, the waffles, and the rolls are all kind of in this cookbook. Now, my English muffin recipe I actually made with Khorasan to begin with, and I've never tried it with spelt or einkorn, so we're going to see how those go. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. All right, so step number 1 is a plan. This actually took me a few days to film, so you will see some outfit changes. Don't worry about that. But some of these use the oven, some need rising time, so I wanted to make a plan. And we're first going to start off with spelt. So in case you're curious, spelt, I would say, has more of a earthy type taste to it. This was actually my very first grain that I ever tried freshly milled, and it's kind of sold us on using freshly milled. But we're first going to start off with English muffins. So this is my English muffin recipe, and so it's kind of a mixture of letting your yeast get all nice and bubbly, but also combining it, and then eventually combining it with your flour. Why I use this big bowl here to begin with, I am not sure, because I ended up using my mixer. So in later ones, you'll see me actually using just the measuring cup. So I'm just getting like the wet stuff together and then also the dry stuff together, and just waiting for all of this to get finished. So this part was easy. Nothing really crazy or anything like that happened here. The only thing is with when it started to knead, of course I did need to add a little bit extra flour. That is normal because I never just dump in all the flour at once. And so I just let this knead for only about 5 minutes, because that's whenever it was kind of looking soft to me. And then of course this is it after the 5 minutes. So it's actually still very, tacky, very sticky, but yet very stretchy. So I wanted to go ahead and add just a little bit more flour, even though I'd already kneaded it, because I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is not enough flour added to that, but yet it's a balance, because you don't want to add too much, then it's dense. So I kind of just did it where I kind of stopped here because it was starting to pull off the sides of the bowl, and I knew that this would be rising for about an hour, and just thinking maybe it'll kind of absorb things. And this was actually looking pretty good. It was extremely stretchy, and it was tacky. Again, no red flags right now. I just figured, you know what, let's just let it rest. That gluten's going to develop a bit more, and let's just see how it goes from here. And so after about an hour, I noticed I needed to really flour my surface. This is what it looks like after an hour. It didn't really rise much at all, but it is still very tacky, yet very, very stretchy. And so I really needed to add a considerable amount of flour just to be able to work with it. Again, it didn't make everything turn out dense, surprisingly. So Just something with this, you just don't be afraid, I think, to use the extra flour. If you need the extra flour, just work it in. Again, this isn't a tall yeast bread, so it's not like it really has to rise, but it was still feeling good. This was still a soft dough. It was still a very stretchy dough, as you can see, and I was able to cut them out, but it still was kind of really tacky, and it kind of created a little bit of a problem later on. But with it being this tacky, as you can see, I wasn't able to just pick up the pieces and hold their shape. But this is what it is. And we're going to let these rise for about 30 minutes or so. But even after 30 minutes, they didn't rise a ton. They rose a little bit, but not as much as other wheats. And even then, as you can see here, I'm kind of having difficulty getting them because they're still just very tacky and not quite holding the shape together. But again, English muffins can be a little forgiving. And so I stuck with it. I was about to just throw it out. This was actually getting pretty frustrating for me that they kept sticking together. But I was like, nope, gonna stick to it. And I did it, cover it with the lid, needed a few minutes, and we flip it. But again, everything just kept sticking. I think if I like greased the lid, that would have helped a bit. But yeah, so it was frustrating, but they actually still did pretty well. And whenever they finally cooked on the bottom, they actually were easier to flip because now the bottom is cooked and it's not as sticky. They were still sticking kind of together, as you can see. That just means I crowded the pan. I should not have added that fifth English muffin there. I should have just done less in the pan so they're not coming together. So lesson learned on that, and I did back off on it whenever I did more. But honestly, you know, some of them were a little wonky shaped, but they actually weren't turning out bad. One of them actually turned out well. So again, these are pretty forgiving, but here they are, the spelt muffins. Not bad at all. And the flavor was actually really good. My kids loved it. My husband said it was good. And it was great with butter. And these actually made great egg sandwiches that I made. So overall, it turned out really well. Just kind of frustrating to work with the dough. Now, next up, we have spelt muffins. I think that muffins are probably one of the easiest recipes, and because it's kind of more of just a dump and go. And so here I am just adding in all the stuff. I did not adjust my recipe. I did not add in more baking powder or anything like that, like you will see later on. But these are just the dry ingredients. I add them, whisk them together, added my wet ingredients, whisk those together. And I kind of alternated on some of these, some with olive oil, some with peanut oil, and it didn't really matter. They always turn out fine, kind of no matter what oil that you use. These also were not in particular like super runny batter. I find that I just didn't need to adjust the recipe at all, and I got a really good batter. And while I say that these muffins make like about a dozen, they actually made more like 12, 13, 14. And that's kind of normal for me. It's usually just a little bit over, but they looked great. We are placing them in the oven and they are done. They rose beautifully and they stayed risen. They did not sink. And these, you know, came out of the pan just fine. I would say these were like perfect muffins. They were really good, just your typical muffins. So if you like muffins, they're so soft, flavorful, delicious. You can see the inside here. It sticks together. You know, it's not crumbling. You don't want crumbly muffins. So yeah, I would say this is a win. And I wanted to show y'all really quick the new Nutrimill bowl that is out. It's the clear bowl. Now mine for now comes with a dough hook, but I don't think they typically come with an extra dough hook. But I will say with all the baking that I'm doing, I loved having a second bowl, and this will fit on the Nutrimill Artiste as well as a Bosh Universal Mixer Plus. I will link this below and you'll get to see me using it. Yeah, I really like the lid here because it's like the lid that's on the Artiste where it twists, and I really liked it. So link below. So now we're going to go on to the Spelt Rolls. I backed off with all these rolls recipes where it's generally making like one large loaf of bread or 2 small loaves, or just generally about 12 to 15 rolls, depending how big you like them. And so here I am, just the typical autolyse that I did. And then eventually I add in the oil, the honey, the rest of it, and then we knead it. Again, I've done a couple videos with rolls recipe. They're pretty straightforward. And as with any sort of flour, this is just where you have to watch and read the dough, not just go by the exact measurements. So with these mixers, you're looking for them to start pulling off the sides of the bowl, which I did with the spelts. Again, nothing crazy to report with this. It was kind of coming together as normal. Again, I stopped I just stopped counting how many cups of flour were going in. I just did it until it was good. But here was after kneading. It was actually very, very sticky and tacky. But with rolls, I generally kind of prefer it to be like this because I can always flour my hands and then roll them up. So always keep that extra flour. I definitely needed it. This was a very tacky dough. But again, I'm okay with that. I can work with that. You may think, oh no, this is not going to turn out well. It will. So these are the rolls that I had, and they rose about 30 minutes on top of the preheated oven, and then I stuck them into a 350-degree oven, and I would say they rose quite well. I could probably have these rise a little bit more, but they were fine. And here they are. They're beautiful rolls. I would say that they are definitely more hearty of a flavor. They're still soft, as you can see here. It melts the butter fine, but it certainly is Spelt is just more of an earthy flavor. So these are delicious rolls. I would say other grains give me softer rolls, but again, these aren't dense. Like, they're still soft. Again, it's these little nuances that the more experimentation that you make, the more you realize it. But you can see here that they're actually really soft, and these are very delicious, but more of a earthy, whole wheaty type flavor. And last but not least, we are trying out Spelt Waffles. Again, like the muffins, a super easy recipe. And again, I find that Spelt of the ancient grains is one of the easier ones to work with. But waffles is a great beginner recipe because, again, you dry ingredients, you then whisk them all together, you then add your wet ingredients and the eggs, and you whisk them all together. The key is just making sure you're adding sufficient amount of buttermilk to get a good waffle batter consistency, and this will vary on the wheat that you use. So this is what I'm looking for, where it kind of ribbons back down. It's like not too liquidy, and this is what you got to look for. Again, I've done detailed videos before, and this is my Cuisinart waffle maker. Use whatever waffle iron that you have and on whatever setting that you have. So you may see that my waffles might come out a little dark. It kind of depends on what you want. It just depends on how you like your waffles. But this is where we like them, where they're soft in the middle, a little bit crispy on the outside. But these turned out extremely well. Spelt waffles and pancakes are delicious. And so we were definitely fans. These were very, very tasty. All right, so a little bit of break to talk further about Grand Teton ancient grains. So I actually mentioned in my intro that we actually have them to thank for bringing einkorn to the United States. And it really is them that has made it more available on a larger scale. And their story really is fascinating. But here's the thing that I love about Grand Teton is they are organic farmers. They are regenerative farmers, which means that they actually are making sure that they're really taking care of their soil. And the more nutritious your soil is, the more nutritious your grains are. On top of that, they are very much guardians of these ancient grains. They are constantly testing their seeds and their grains to make sure that they are still genetically pure, and also that they are glyphosate free and heavy metal free and all of those things that we don't want in our grains. They actually test for that as well. And another thing that I love is that I can just purchase these grains online and they are shipped to my house. So if you have not checked out Grand Teton ancient grains, you really are missing out. These are not the only ancient grains that they have. They also have difficult ones to find, like emmer. They also have other ones like rye. They have a very special hard red, a Yakura hard red variety. And they are also a mill as well. So if you don't have a grain mill right now, because I know they're hard to get a hold of, you can go ahead and purchase some of these grains already ground up into flour, so you can start experiencing that yourself. But as you always know, I do recommend that you mill them yourself at home for the maximum amount of nutritional benefit. So be sure to check them out. You just go to grainsandgrit.com/Teton. Use this coupon code here for 10% off your first order. And I really thank Grand Teton Ancient Grains for sponsoring Grains and Grit. Okay, so next up is Khorasan, and if you've been around this channel for a hot minute, you may have come to realize that Khorasan's kind of my favorite. So I really like this. So we're going to start off with the English muffins. Now this English muffin recipe was originally made with Khorasan. I think actually in the recipe I say Kamut. So fun fact, Kamut is just the trademark name for Khorasan. So they are the same wheat berries, just Kamut is, you know, the difference between Kleenex and regular tissues. We I would call everything a Kleenex, even if they may not be the name brand, but they're in essence the same. So Gray and Teton does very well with their Khorasan. I've never had a problem with it. Still organic, all of those good things. But with this recipe, it came together beautifully. This is exactly what I was expecting, where after kneading, the dough is still slightly tacky. This is where I want it to be. And then we're just gonna let it rise for an hour. Again, no surprises with this. It just did better than all of the other ones. As you'll see later, I definitely had some problem with Einkorn. But this, you know, it holds its shape well. We then let it rise. They rose fairly well. That was after about 30 minutes. And, you know, that's a beautiful rise, kind of your typical look to English muffins. And then, of course, since they weren't like stupid tacky, they were easier to transfer and to cook. Just know with English muffins, it really depends on your stovetop and the pan that you're using of how long it takes to cook on each side. So this is going to be some trial and error. You will see that some of mine came out a little too overcooked, but that's okay because again, you have to keep adjusting. And here they are. These are beautiful. Exactly what I want English muffins to turn out as. I would say these were just perfect. Next up, we have the Khorasan muffins. This is also another favorite. I often reach for Khorasan when I make muffins, and this was delicious. Again, pretty much touch and go. Now with Khorasan, I typically do increase the baking powder just a little bit, like a 1/4 teaspoon for 12 dozen muffins, or like 1/2 teaspoon for the full 24 dozen muffins, just because I find that it just needs that little bit more oomph to help rise. But as you can see, these were fine. These were not as liquidy as you saw the Spelt, and that's fine. So they baked normal. I think these took about 17 minutes to bake, and here they are. Once again, these are beautiful. They are holding their shape together. They are tasty, delicious, and slightly spongy, but overall, they're not crumbly, they're soft, and they're gonna work. Now, next we have the Khorasan Rolls. Definitely my favorite ever. Like, Khorasan makes the best rolls. I will die on this hill. And so we just, what you saw there is I was doing the autolyse next to while the English muffins were also mixing, kneading together. But here we just have it where we're just, again, adding the ingredients. I have to check to make sure I'm adding enough flour based on what I'm using. Knead it for the typical 9 minutes. And then with this, you still are looking and wanting it to be slightly tacky. That is normal with Khorasan, but it is stretchy, but it is slightly tacky. So when doing the rolls, that's where you want it, because if you add too much flour, they're just going to be too dense. So you just need to flour your hands and in order to roll and shape them. And so after rising, I probably should have let these rise just a little bit more, because they can rise a lot more. The more they rise, the fluffier they're going to be. And I should have let them rise a little bit more, but I was kind of in a hurry doing all the baking, and but they still turned out well. They just needed about 25 minutes in the oven, and here they are. They are beautiful. As you can see, they look a bit more white. They are a whiter type looking bread. It's kind of hard to tell that this is whole grain, but they are super soft, very fluffy, absolutely delicious. The flavor is astounding. Just this light, buttery type flavor. Many people love these. Last but not least, we have the Khorasan Waffles. Again, another favorite. Again, I just love Khorasan. I cannot sing its praises enough. I'm sorry. I know people may disagree with me, but I love it. But the waffles are also really good as well. Now with Khorasan, you still want it to be this type of consistency with waffles, but you may, before adding more buttermilk, if you think they're dry, just kind of let it sit for maybe a minute or two, and before adding more buttermilk. But here are the waffles, and they look great. They turned out great. They are a little bit lighter looking than the Spelt, and the flavor is different as well. These are just a light, delicious waffles, also great for pancakes. Now we have Einkorn. I think the one that has the most hype in the grain world is Einkorn. And so we're starting off with Einkorn English muffins, and I will say this just was kind of giving me a little bit of just some fits. So it did start out normal. We're just adding the milk and the yeast and the sugar, and we're just adding that together. And then we start the kneading, and then I did want to start, you just, as it's going, you add a little bit of flour, and then
I read in a book that einkorn needs to be kneaded a little bit less, so I did back off on that just a little bit, but I still saw that it was a big goopy mess, and so I still was adding more flour. And at this point, this is after kneading, and it's still kind of like a goopy mess, but I'm like, hey, let's let it rise a little bit and see what happens. So this is what it looks like after that hour-long rise, and it's still kind of a big goopy mess. It is extremely sticky, extremely tacky, very loose. And so I'm like, let's flour the counter, dump this out. I really added a significant amount of flour. I basically worked this flour in until I could just work with it. As you can see here, it's still, oh man, it's just so sticky, so tacky, but I was determined to make this work. This was like, I thought the spelt English muffins were frustrating. These were even more frustrating. So I kept really having to flour my hands, really just keep adding flour until I could just work with it. So this is a little bit better, still very sticky tacky, but I was at least able to get some decent kind of shape here. And then I'm just letting it rise. And so this is about 30 minutes. It rose decent, but the problem is it started coming together, and then I had to scrape it off the pan, which was like a mess, as you can see here. So I'm kind of just trying to shape it in the pan. That one was better. It had more flour to it. Now I will say this was a very spongy type dough. And then, yeah, just a whole lot of flour needed. I need to work with this more using einkorn. But finally, once it at least was baking on the bottom, that was at least baked enough where it wasn't sticking, I could flip them. And these ended up cooking well. As you can see, like, that's a beautiful one. That's a gorgeous English muffin. Some of these I kind of cooked too long. Again, I was just trying to figure it out. But here they are, some of them very wonky looking. But these actually were delicious. My kids loved these. My husband liked them as well. They still did well with like egg and cheese sandwiches on English muffins. It turned out well.
Okay, so I wanted to pop in here again and actually talk about einkorn. Einkorn is just, it is tricky. I will say I have had an easier time switching over to Khorasan than einkorn. I find that I'm still trying to tweak einkorn. But if you love einkorn and you really want to use it, good news, Grand Teton has a new cookbook that is out. This is actually by Katie Coyle. So if you didn't know this, Grand Teton Ancient Grains was originally founded by two brothers, Jade and Jackson, and Katie is actually Jackson's wife. I've actually interviewed Jade here on this channel, so if you haven't checked that out, you need to check that up here. But she came out with this cookbook because what started Grand Teton is their love of einkorn, and that's what started it. And I will say, I have not done any direct recipes from here, but looking through this, they look to be very easily accessible recipes and recipes that you know of, like English muffins or rolls or just loaves of bread. And she does give them instructions. Now, she predominantly uses all-purpose einkorn, but she does give instructions for switching that over to freshly milled, whole grain, einkorn flour, and also if you want to do sourdough or yeast, she gives instructions as well as maybe switching a yeast over to a yeast recipe over to a sourdough, vice versa. So looking through this already, I just got this, which is why I haven't had time to really experiment with the recipes. But I was impressed so far. It is also a beautiful cookbook. These chocolate muffins, I definitely need to try. But I'm especially interested in it because I've just struggled the most with einkorn. So maybe I just need dedicated recipes for einkorn. And so if you're wanting that as well, right now I can recommend this cookbook just because it looks like it's just going to work. The recipes make sense when I look at them. She kind of also gives you instructions of how einkorn is different. So I think that'll help you if you have any recipes that you love and you want to convert them, that'll help you as well.
All right, so after the English muffins craziness, we're now doing einkorn muffins, which thankfully I have done these before, so I had a bit more experience. I already know that I need to increase the baking powder just a little bit like I did with Khorasan, but otherwise, same old, same old. You're just going to be mixing the dry ingredients, and then you add the wet ingredients, and then you add whatever fruit that you needed. Again, all of these are just blueberry muffins. I can't remember if I mentioned that before. So these are blueberries. I just pulled them straight from the freezer. The blueberries are excellent to use in muffins frozen. It's wonderful. So a little tip there. But as you can see, it actually came together. It's not really soupy. This is actually a good muffin batter. Once again, with this one, I was able to get about, I was able to actually get a lot, and I baked them. Now it is normal with einkorn that you're going to see them nicely risen, and then they kind of deflate a little bit when doing this. Now this one, I actually ended up needing to put back in the oven for just a little bit. So these cooked about 20 minutes, but these einkorn muffins are extremely spongy. So much so I kind of had a little difficulty getting them out of the muffin pans. I really let them rest in the muffin pans for a good 10-15 minutes. They're still warm when I get them out, but I love using einkorn in muffins because they're super spongy, like almost like a sponge cake. It's just a unique texture. And of course it's absolutely delicious. You can see they still stay together. It's not like it's crumbly, but it's just this beautiful, cute little spongy little muffin. And last but not least, we have Einkorn Rolls. So Einkorn with the rolls is similar to how it is with Khorasan. So they are typically going to end up being just more tacky, sticky. This is to the left here. I was also, multitasking in the kitchen. And so this is what it is here. This is the dough after kneading. It's still like, it's just kind of falling apart, to be honest. And so what I did is actually let it rest and rise. We actually ate supper, so it was probably over an hour, and this is what it is risen. So it is breaking apart, which typically means the gluten is not fully developed, but it was actually feeling light and kind of spongy with the dough. And I figured, you know what, I think this is going to be fine for rolls because they're going to rise again. So I do recommend that because at first they were like probably really super sticky, tacky to work with, but that rise actually helped them. And again, I rose them for about an hour. And these are the rolls that I have ready to go. I let them rise for about 35 minutes. These don't rise as tall as other rolls. I could maybe rise them a little bit more, but I went ahead and baked them because I do know with einkorn, they typically are like a flatter type roll, kind of like Sister Schuster's rolls, from the store, but they are a little bit darker. They're not as white as the Khorasan, but they're still delicious. They're actually still very soft, and I do recommend them. And then of course we have the Einkorn Waffles. I think the waffles is my favorite with einkorn. Now I will say with einkorn, you definitely need to watch the amount of liquid that you add. In this one, I went ahead and added like 1.5 cups of buttermilk. I actually halved my waffle recipe for the record. And I added about 1.5 cups of buttermilk, let it sit for like 5 minutes to make sure that was fine. And it was. And so I went ahead and cooked them up in my waffle maker. Some of them looked a little wonky just because of the amount of batter that went in, but they were still slightly crispy on the outside, soft on the inside. And these are really, really delicious. I highly recommend einkorn for waffles and pancakes. Again, I think any of these are really good for waffles or pancakes, but these were really great. I think they were kind of the family favorite making these with einkorn. But otherwise, these turned out as normal as to be expected. They're waffles. Not much to report on that, but they were absolutely delicious.
All right, so that is it, y'all. So here are my verdicts with the grains. I think muffins were kind of the most versatile. Using spelt turned out kind of more similar as if I were to use hard red or hard white, your typical muffin type look. Now, Khorasan and einkorn, I've made muffins with these two grains a lot. And one thing that I love about using Khorasan and einkorn is they come out just more spongy, almost like a sponge cake type feel, but they're just a very unique texture, and I love the texture. In my cookbook, I actually do have chocolate chip Khorasan muffins, which are chef's kiss amazing. So just using chocolate chips with Khorasan, and they're really, really good. But I did find that both with Khorasan and einkorn to have muffins, it helps to increase that baking powder a little bit. But even then, especially with einkorn, expect them to sink just a little bit when you pull them out of the oven. But don't be discouraged if they sink because they're still really good and not dense at all. Now, as far as the waffles go, I think it's important with einkorn that you do give it about 5 minutes to let it sit and soak up that buttermilk before adding more, just to see if you have the right consistency, because I find with einkorn, it just may take a little bit to really judge if you need more buttermilk or not. But either way, the waffles were amazing with any of these wheats. I think my husband's favorite is the Einkorn Waffles, but I also love Khorasan. I kind of can't pick my favorite. It's really going to be one of those where you need to experiment and see which one you like best, because each one of them have a different flavor profile. Now, as far as the rolls, I am still the biggest fan of Khorasan Rolls. It's why I have a dedicated video of just using Khorasan for rolls. I find that they are very fluffy, very light. I've served them to many, many guests. I've taken them to homeschool potlucks, potlucks at church, all of that stuff, and people absolutely love them. As with any roll, they are best fresh out of the oven. But I find that using Khorasan, I think that's the winner for the rolls, because it's just a light, fluffy, delicious muffin. The texture is great, the look is great, the flavor is great, like everything's great. And so far I'm still sold out. Khorasan is the winner for the rolls. Okay, now the English muffins, I think as you could tell me doing this, I think the winner is definitely Khorasan. Now again, my original recipe was using Khorasan. I think with Spelt, I think they would have turned out fine with Spelt, but I just made a mistake. And I really think the problem with the Spelt was I just needed to add more flour. I just didn't add enough flour. Now the Einkorn, the problem with that is, as you saw, I just kept, even after kneading and after it rising, I just kept having to add more and more flour. Even doing that, they did not turn out dense. They turned out well, but they were still just kind of a goopy, you know, just a lot stickier, where I just think overall it did best with the Khorasan. Again, I think it would do well with Spelt if I just added more flour. So far the Khorasan definitely is a winner with the English muffins. Again, the Einkorn Cookbook has a recipe for English muffins with einkorn that I glanced at it. It's a bit different than mine. And so I would like to try it to see if just those tweaks help using einkorn. Because again, this just is such a tacky, sticky dough. I mean, just, it can be a mess using einkorn. So I think right now I'm still going to stick with Khorasan for the English muffins. They turned out perfect. They looked perfect, everything like that. And of course the flavor was great, but the flavor even with Spelt and the einkorn was really good as well. So which of these three grains are my favorite? If you haven't been able to tell, I mean, I love all three of these grains. I really do. They have excellent flavor. They're great for different things, but I'm still a Khorasan fan, y'all. I'm such a huge fan of Khorasan. I think this one with Khorasan, it just kind of splits the baby, where it still can be a little tricky to work with, but not as tricky as einkorn, and also not as earthy, robust of a taste as Spelt. So Spelt has a little bit more of the kind of like a hard red flavor, not quite like hard red, but a little bit more of that whole wheaty type flavor, where Khorasan is a wonderful, delicious, milder grain flavor that just works beautifully in many, many things. Okay, so that's it with the experiment, y'all. Let me know your thoughts below. Which of these grains do you love? Which ones have you tried? Which of these recipes do you like the best? I wanna hear all your thoughts about ancient grains. And if there's another one that you love that it wasn't here, again, there's a ton, mention that in the comments below. And if you actually wanna check out that interview that I did with Jade with Grand Teton Ancient Grains, you really need to check it out because it's a fascinating story, how they got started, and you can check that out right here. And of course, be shopping at grainsandgrit.com/Teton to pick up your beloved ancient grains. And as always, I hope that y'all have a wonderful and fantastic day. Happy baking, and I'll see you next week. Bye.